Hi guys, how's it going? Hope you are having a fantastic day. If you're new here, my name is Michelle. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today I am going to be doing a wrap up of all the books that I read in September. So I read 6 books in September and I have decided on a format for these videos. Obviously wrap ups are a big thing here, and I think it's a great idea to recap all the books that you read in a month. But to make it a little bit more interesting and compelling to you guys to watch, I have decided that how I'm going to do them is I'm going to basically rank over the course of the video my worst books of the month to my best books of the month. So I'll start off the video with my first book, which was my worst book of the month. This is the only book that I DNF'd this month. I think about 200 pages in I got into this book. And the book I'm talking about is Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. Now, Margaret Atwood is, it seems a bit of blasphemy to not like one of her books around here. She seems to be the, a really well-beloved author, and I really enjoyed The Handmaid's Tale. I thought that book was really successful. I really loved the limited perspective, and I felt that overall the dystopia that she was trying to get across was interesting and effective, and it was something I hadn't read before. So after that, I was quite keen to try another one of her books, and this I had heard was another dystopian book. I didn't find this book that successful. The main character, whose name is Jimmy, also referred to as Snowman, I just really couldn't relate to him. The things that this book is examining, which is also like genetic manipulation, I also just didn't really enjoy as a topic, and I didn't really enjoy the way that Atwood kind of demonized it. I just don't have this negative view of, I guess, of like genetic modification. I think that genetic modification, especially in our food, is really important going forward, because unless you want to put a limit on human population, we need to find more efficient ways to make and distribute food. We need to find ways to produce food that is obviously affecting our planet in a less negative way, because as we know, food production is one of the biggest impactors on our planet. So to kind of demonize genetic modification in this way, I guess it's just not something I'm personally interested in reading about. The other thing that I found not very compelling about this book is the writing style. I usually like weird books, but this book was weird in a way that was quite confusing and really just didn't catch on. I did figure out I was interested in DNFing this book, and I did go and read the rest of the plot of what happens on Wikipedia, and it is an interesting ending, and I understand what Atwood was trying to get across with this story, but for me personally it wasn't very successful, and now I'm left with a feeling of I don't know what to read next by her, because yeah, I think I might end up reading the Testaments at some point, but yeah, that might be my next foray into Atwood. But yeah, for me, this one I gave it 2 stars. The next book I want to talk about is a short story, and this is A Sheltered Woman by Yi-Yin Liu. So I believe you probably can read this for free online somewhere. You probably don't have to buy a copy. Yeah, I gave this book 3 stars. This is basically a story about a woman named Auntie May, and she works as a nanny caring for children and their mothers in the first month of their life, which is obviously a really critical time in a baby and a mother's bonding. So she's there to facilitate and help the mother in that first month. The only reason this book got 3 stars is because I wanted more, and I feel bad to criticize the format of this book, but Auntie May was such an interesting character, and her thoughts on the world and the way that she had distanced herself emotionally from people due to her own relationship with her family, I just found really fascinating, and I almost wish this book was more of a short novel. The next 2 books that I read this month I also gave 3 stars, and those were the first 2 books in The Lord of the Rings, which are obviously The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers. So I did enjoy these books, but for me, the reason why Tolkien doesn't appeal to me personally is that his writing is way too flowery. The other thing about The Lord of the Rings that I didn't really enjoy is the fact that it's just like someone sitting down and telling you a story. And I mean that in the way that you have no opportunity to get into the characters' heads or understand where they're coming from and how they're feeling in the moment. In addition to that, there are several times throughout the books where really important things or happen off screen and are then recounted to the other characters that are sort of in the main POV. And that really took the excitement out of the books. An example of this is, I hope this isn't too kind of like spoilery, but like basically there's a situation where Gandalf gets in a fight in the first book with Saruman, told basically through Gandalf sitting at the Council of Elrond and basically just telling the story in a couple of sentences of what happened with Saruman. And to me, it seemed like a pretty important plot point to happen off screen. And there's so many examples in this where sort of things happen to characters, and yeah, it just feels like we're being told the story instead of experiencing the story through the characters' eyes. And I wish I had have gotten to know the characters a bit better over the course of this. So yeah, if you're into being like kind of told like a fairy tale or a mythic kind of story, you probably like Lord of the Rings, but it's really never going to make a favorite shelf for me. And personally, I know this might be sacrilege to some people, but I kind of prefer the movies. The second last book that I read this month is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. This is a massive tome that's been on my bookshelf for a while, so I'm really glad to have picked it up, also considering the fact that I absolutely loved The Secret History when I read it at the start of this year. Now, I'm not going to go in depth with this novel because I'm actually going to do a video reviewing and comparing these two books shortly on my channel. So if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe and stay looked out for it because it'll be coming out soon. But the reason I enjoyed The Goldfinch, I gave this 4 stars. I gave The Secret History 5 stars, so that one was slightly better in my opinion. However, this book was still really successful. Essentially what happens is Theo Decker is our main character, and when he is a young man, he is at an art gallery with his mother in New York City when there is a terrorist attack, and his mother is actually killed in this incident. And the story from there basically follows on the rest of his life and how this incident really affects him and sends him down a certain path. The things that I think were really positive were I thought they were really strong characters over the course of this novel. I loved to read about Theo, Boris, and Theo's father was a really interesting character as well. His mother and the kind of void that she left behind in his life was really, really interesting to explore. For me, the second half of this novel just went on a bit too long and dragged. I think the story could have been cut a little bit shorter. But is this excellent writing? Yes. Would I recommend this to everybody? Yes, especially in lieu of the fact that the movie is really getting some pretty negative reviews. So I don't know if I'll end up worrying about watching that one now. But yeah, really glad to have read The Goldfinch, gave it 4 stars, thought it was really, really good and would highly recommend this one. The second last book that I want to talk about is The Sword of Destiny by Andrzej Sapkowski, and this is the second book in the Witcher series. If you're not familiar with the Witcher series, it's basically a series of adult fantasy novels. These were originally in Polish. This one has been translated by David French. And the story of The Witcher basically follows a man named Geralt who is a witcher, and what that means is he essentially goes around being a bounty hunter for dangerous magical creatures. So each of the short stories in these 2 prequels to the main series basically kind of cover Geralt dealing with different monsters. The reason that I really fell in love with this series and why I absolutely intend to read them all is that Geralt is a really interesting character. I really enjoyed getting into his perspective because he's very critical of the world that he's living in, and he has a lot of emotional intelligence about things that are happening around him. So he's really a good character to read from. But he also has his own personal struggles and problems in his life. In addition to that, this story really pokes fun at a lot of different fairy tales and kind of like different mythoses and tropes. The thing about Sapkowski is that he kind of turns them on their head and pokes fun at them. There's a moment where Geralt's having a conversation with a sorcerer and basically telling the sorcerer that he detests him as a human being because he performs blood magic, and Geralt believes, that the blood magic for this kind of spell needs to use the blood of a virgin, which, Geralt finds really reprehensible behavior. And it's really funny because the sorcerer turns around and basically says to him that I don't use the blood of a virgin. We just tell everybody that you have to use the blood of a virgin because otherwise they'd know that you could use any old guy's blood for this magic spell, and people are trying to muscle in on our trade. And that just really made me laugh, and I thought it was really clever. I really enjoy reading from Geralt's perspective. This series also has a lot of really great humor in it, especially with some characters such as the bard Dandelion, who I absolutely loved whenever he was in a scene, and also the sorceress Yennefer, who Geralt has an on-again, off-again relationship with. So yeah, I really enjoyed reading these 2 prequels of the Witcher series, and I'm really looking forward to getting into the main novels. I'm also really glad to have just found another adult fantasy series that I'm really enjoying reading, because why I really kind of put forward myself someone that loves fantasy, I have had such a love-hate relationship with adult fantasy since I started reading at the start of last year. I find I'm so hit and miss with fantasy. I either absolutely love the book or just can't stand it in the slightest. So it's really good to have found another series that I'm really enjoying so far. The last book that I want to talk about is my favorite book of the month. It's the only book this month that I rated 5 stars, and that is A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. You guys, I am officially on the Becky Chambers hype train. This is like very much like a slice of life sci-fi, but it just explored so much about people. And I've realized as a reader, I was really sitting back recently and thinking about what I like in novels. And if an author can write characters well, I really don't care what genre the book is in. I am interested in learning about these people and what makes them tick. And Becky Chambers just did such a good job of that in her first novel. There is bugger all plot in these, at least in the first book. This one definitely has a lot more plot. So I read that book, loved it, was obsessed, knew it was going to be one of my favorite books of the year. Immediately ordered the next 2 books in the Wayfarer series. And then I read A Closed and Common Orbit and went, holy shit, she's outdone herself. This book is even better than the last. This one, as opposed to the first one, which was kind of like a story about all these different crew members on a ship, this story follows just 2 characters. I'm not going to say too much about like the events that happen in this novel because it would be quite spoilery, but the thing that I really find myself loving so much about Becky Chambers' books is that she explores so much about what it means to be human and finding our place in the world, but she also has this just sense of hope that radiates through her books. So they just end up feeling really, really cozy and just so enjoyable to read. And yeah, she's definitely a new favorite author. I was absolutely obsessed with this book and I can't recommend it enough if you guys haven't read this series, although I might be the last person to read it because it's been super hyped here on YouTube. So this was my wrap up for the month of September. I really hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. If you guys haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. I have Goodreads and Twitter, which I'll leave down below if you'd like to connect with me on social networks. Thank you so much for watching this video and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!